may not know me, my name is Sue Chan Carasoni, and I'm the Managing Director for the McMaster Collaborative for Health and Aging. And while we're here today on Zoom, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories upon which we gather. And McMaster University, and where I've signed in from today, is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. And as we approach this Friday, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we're reminded and encouraged to reflect on the tragic history and actions of the past. And these actions have ongoing impacts on Indigenous people and communities, including impacts on their health, healthcare, and structural systems. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our collaborative conversation series at the McMaster Collaborative for Health and Aging, where we bring together researchers and people with lived experience to share their journeys and lessons learned in patient-oriented research. And following these conversations, attendees are invited to join our Reflecting Together time, and that's from 1 to 1:30. And this is an opportunity for all of us to come together and share our thoughts on the topics discussed. And this is an opportunity for attendees to continue the conversation and take our combined learnings into action, especially as we're not able to meet in person and have those conversations as we leave the room. We wanted to try and replicate that feeling with our time on Zoom. So before we get started, I just have a couple housekeeping items. As you have noticed, you will have received the alert that this event is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with you after the event. It'll also be posted on our website if you want to share it with anyone else. So if you don't want to be wish to be on camera, you can disable your video. And we also asked so that we can keep the background noise to a minimum, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphone if you're not speaking. We welcome all questions and conversation, but during the initial part, if you wouldn't mind sharing those via the chat function, and then the speakers can get to them when they're ready later in the session. And you'll see that our live transcription is enabled, so you can turn it on and off individually using I believe it's called the live transcription button, which should be in the bottom toolbar of your Zoom window. And just a little plug for us on social media. We're on Twitter. You can find us at MacCollabAging, and we invite you to continue this conversation on Twitter using hashtag collaborative conversations and tagging us. And so for a Reflecting Together session, it's going to be in the same Zoom room. So just if you're interested in joining that, you can just stay on at the end. And lastly, we appreciate your feedback and want to know how we're doing. So after this event, we'll share the link to the survey that is up here. We'll share it with you again, and please and thank you in advance. So I just have 2 quick slides before I hand it over. In case you're not familiar with the McMaster Collaborative for Health and Aging, we're a coalition of researchers, trainees, older adults, and caregivers working together to improve the health and well-being of older Canadians by advancing patient-oriented research on aging. In part by having events like this today, where we can talk about lessons learned from people who have been working in this space for some time. So a few highlights of other activities going on. We have launched our first ever McMaster Collaborative for Health and Aging Engagement Fund. And so that provides the support for trainees who are interested in engaging older adults and or caregivers in their thesis research. And so the deadline for that is October 14th. You can find more information about this opportunity on our website. And just a plug for our next collaborative conversation, it'll be on October 26th, mark it in your calendar. The title will be Partnering with Family Members of Residents Who Have Dementia to Implement and Evaluate the Family Care Decision Support Intervention in 6 countries. So we'll be circulating more details and hope you'll be able to join us. And now I'm pleased to have our special guests introduce themselves, and thank you all for being here with us today.
Hi, everyone. This is Kathy Fisher. I'm on Faculty School of Nursing and the lead of health sciences in the school, and also the statistician in the ACRU, so Aging Community Health Research Unit, and was working on this study with Maureen, David, and the research team.
Hi, everybody. I'm Maureen Markle-Reid. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a professor in the School of Nursing, and I'm also the co-scientific lead of the McMaster Collaborative for Health and Aging, and the co-scientific director of the Aging Community and Health Research Unit, along with Dr. Rebecca Ganan. I also have a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in interventions for older adults with multimorbidity and their caregivers. And my research focuses on designing, implementing, evaluating, and scaling up integrated patient-oriented interventions for older adults with multimorbidity, and that we define as 2 or more chronic conditions, with the goal of improving their health and as well as reducing cost. I've also been involved in a number of other work involving pragmatic trials and trying to improve the methods related to that, specifically making sure that our trials address patient and provider priorities and issues, and also that we design trials with scale up in mind, with the goal of actually implementing these interventions more widely. So that's about me. But the most important person today is David Dayler, our patient partner, and I'm so thrilled to have you here with us, David. Thank you so much. And I'll just do a brief introduction. David has worked as an educator, a parish minister, adjunct faculty at St. Michael's University, a retreat facilitator, faith formation consultant, program coordinator in the Diocese of Hamilton. So what do you do in your spare time, David? So David holds a Master's of Theological Studies from St. Michael's University, University of Toronto, and he recently retired as the director of the Disciple and Parish Life Office for the Diocese of Hamilton, and is now the director of Catechesis at St. Anne's Parish in Ancaster. He's also a gifted author, and he's written a number of books. And the reason why he's involved today is that David actually experienced a stroke in 2017 and has been working since then to assist the ongoing improvement of stroke care for patients. He is the co-chair of the Patient and Family Advisory Committee for the Central South Regional Stroke Network, which is based out of Hamilton Health Sciences. As well, he was integrally involved in developing the My Stroke Journey map, which I will explain in just a moment. But most importantly, David has been very involved and very active as a patient partner in our stroke study, which we're calling the Transitional Care Stroke Intervention Study. And he's just a pleasure to work with and has been very involved with a number of aspects of the research involved, including developing videos and assisting us in developing the website that we'll explain in a moment. So again, thank you, David, for joining us. So how we will do this presentation is, first of all, we're going to start with a few slides about how we have involved patients as partners in our research. And then we're going to provide an example of a study where we involve patients as partners. And from there we'll launch into a fireside chat style conversation with David. So David, Kathy, and I have prepared for this and have come up with a few questions that David will respond to. And then we'll discuss some key points related to David's experience as a patient research partner in our transitional care stroke intervention. So I'm just going to change the slide and launch right into the background around patient partnership. So why do we involve patients as research partners? Well, patients' lived experience of healthcare, we know, can really improve the relevance of the research, the impact and the quality of the research. So we know for a fact that having their lived experience, bringing that to the table, can really improve the research as a whole. Secondly, we know that research conducted on people without their input is unethical. So nothing for me without me, particularly in more marginalized communities that are often not involved in research or excluded from research because of some of the barriers they face. So engagement is definitely very important, for hard to reach populations, like older adults who have multiple chronic conditions, who are often high users of the healthcare system, but are often underrepresented in research projects involving patient partners. As well, there's very limited guidance for researchers on how to engage patients as research partners. The voice of patient partners with multimorbidity in particular is lacking in the literature. And finally, there is a need for guidance, more guidance for patients to support their involvement as research partners. So there's a lot of reasons why. So this, sorry, I'll just go back.
That was me, Maureen.
That was you. Okay, thanks, Kathy. So this is the International Association of Public Participation, and it really provides a spectrum of public participation that shows really 5 levels of engagement of patient partners or public partners, which range from inform, which involves basically just letting patients know about the research, to consult, where the goal is to obtain feedback from patients, to involve and collaborate, where researchers work very closely with patients to share decision-making power about all aspects of the research. And finally, the empowered level, where decision-making is made by patients who actively control, direct, and manage the research process. So the inform and the consult levels of engagement predominantly involve more a flow of information in one direction. So from the patient partner to the researcher, or from the researcher to the patient partner. Whereas the involve and collaborate levels of involvement really involve two-way knowledge exchange between patient partners and researchers. So certainly our goal in our project is to move towards the, move along the spectrum towards the empower level of engagement. So this, we're going to talk today about David's experience as a patient partner in the transitional care stroke intervention study, where he collaborated with us. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the study. So this was a pragmatic study, and the overall purpose of the study was to improve the quality and the experience of transitions from hospital to home for older adults who are 55 years of age and over, who had experienced a stroke, but also had at least 2 or more chronic conditions. And they were also referred to outpatient stroke rehabilitation when they were discharged from the hospital. So we conducted this study at 2 sites in Ontario, 2 outpatient stroke rehab clinics. The first was the Regional Rehab Center at Hamilton Health Sciences, and the other site was Hotel Dieu Shaver Rehabilitation Center. The eligible and consenting participants were randomly assigned to either receive usual outpatient stroke rehabilitation services or usual stroke rehabilitation services plus this new transitional care stroke intervention study. And what we did is we measured outcomes like physical and mental health, depressive symptoms, stroke self-management, and the cost of use of health and social services at baseline and again at 6 months. So again, the overall goal of this intervention, which was 6 months in duration, was to improve the quality and experience of transitions from hospital to home. So this was a complex, integrated, and evidence-based intervention, and it was offered in addition to usual outpatient stroke care. And it was delivered by an interprofessional team of healthcare providers from each of the sites. And that included a registered nurse, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, a speech language pathologist, and a social worker. And the transitional care intervention study was coordinated by a care coordinator or a system navigator. And it consisted of 5 components that are shown on the screen here. So the first was that the care coordinator followed up with patients 2 to 3 days after they were discharged from hospital and checked in with them to see how they were doing. And secondly, the team provided up to 6 virtual visits, so that was either by phone or by video conference, to the patients over a 6-month period. The third was that monthly interprofessional case conferences were held with the entire interprofessional team. And that's where the team discussed individual patients and developed a patient-centered plan of care. The fourth component was care coordination and system navigation support, which is essentially helping patients and their caregivers navigate through the healthcare system and identify and link with various health and social services. And finally, provided access to My Stroke Recovery Journey website, which Kathy's going to explain and is the focus of our presentation today to help to support system navigation. So I'm going to hand it over to Kathy now to continue on.
So a bit more about that yellow box that Maureen was just talking about, the website itself. So on the right-hand side is a visual of what you see when you first enter the website. And it also is what was the look. So we tried to replicate as much as we could the paper-based version of My Stroke Recovery map that was developed by patients with providers and for patients. So it actually, the map itself, which is a paper-based product, looked a lot like what you see on the right-hand side. And I think we thought this would be very simple to just digitize this map and put it online. And it was anything but simple. It actually required us to rethink almost everything about how you use the map and navigate through it, all that. So we were really digitizing this map, and that's a look at it. And so what it is it's helping patients with system navigation. So the aim is that providers can sit down with patients and show them what the journey of recovering from a stroke looks like. And the map shows sort of at a very high level, inpatient care is where you're beginning, and then through to community rehab and ultimately recovery, continuing your recovery. So they talk to patients about that. It also helps patients self-manage and set goals for themselves. And it's sort of it's nice in that it's a snapshot of what the journey looks like all in one page. So you can get your head around it, and I think patients can get their head around it and feel comfortable with where they're headed, where they are and where they're headed, what it's going to look like next. And then when you link or click on these boxes, the orange, the green, the blue, you actually get more information on what the service is all about or what that phase is all about, links to community services, for example. So you can click on these boxes and dig deeper into what these different phases look like. So that's a bit about the website. And then for the study, the clinical trial itself, and then the website within it, we have a governance structure. So there's a steering committee, and we put the patient partners, we have them represented on the steering committee, so they're a part of that committee. And then also they're a part of our research team, and we had patient partners from both sites that were in the study. So Hotel du Shaver in the Niagara region and Hamilton Health Sciences in Hamilton. So we had patient partners that were representing each of these sites, both of them, and they were on the steering committee and on our research team. Oops, I can't be too fast there. So this is very high level what CIHR recommends in terms of principles for patient engagement. So we should consider these principles when we're structuring how we're going to approach patient engagement. Supporting the patient's mutual respect for the viewpoints of the patients, and co-building. So thinking about not doing the work ourselves, but doing it in partnership with the patients. So these are sort of high-level principles that we then had to operationalize. And this is a bit about how we operationalize those principles. So some of the things we did in the study, we had a lead for patient engagement to make sure we were observing those principles and actually making sure we were engaging and successfully so with the patients. We did align the roles of the patient partners with their own skill set, their needs, their interests. So we tried to do that as much as we could and engage them in activities that actually used their experience and was helpful in making decisions, and also their own interests and in the study and what they wanted to get out of their participation. So we tried to do that. and addressed potential barriers as well. So we had to think through just the timing of meetings and making sure that that worked with the schedules of the patient partners. And paying the patient partners to enable them to review the materials and participate in the research. So those are some of the things. There are lots of other things we considered that we'll talk about, and I think David will help us understand about those barriers, but we tried to address them so that we facilitated the patient partners and helped them to participate. Education and support about the research process, about keeping them up to date with the bigger trial and where we were at and findings and so on. We did that throughout. We had role descriptions for the patient partners in lay language that would make sense to them. We had a budget. So this is helpful. You need, if you want to do patient engagement, you need to have money to actually make it happen. So we had a dedicated budget for patient engagement. And we planned regular meetings to communicate, support the patients and make sure they were up to date with what we were finding and where we were going next. And then regarding them as equals in the research process. That just that doesn't really tell you much about exactly what we did. And I think David's going to speak to more about how he felt and how we did that. But I guess our perspective, our mindset was that they were equals. We weren't experts. We were all at the table, and we were going to sort it out and make decisions as a collective without giving undue priority to any one participant or any one expert. We were all experts at the table. So those are some of the things we did. There, now we're having our fireside chat. I'll turn it over.
Thanks, Kathy. So we'll just launch right in. David, if you want to unmute yourself. That's great. We're really pleased.
There we go.
Really, again, pleased and really thrilled to have you and looking forward to this fireside style conversation. We'll see how it goes. So I'll start with the first question, David. So can you tell us why you became involved as a research partner in the transitional care and stroke study?
Actually, by accident. In 2017, I experienced a stroke. I was a healthy, overworked, overachieving, I guess, a 69-year-old man who had never really been hospitalized, never really suffered a major illness. We were out shopping one day, the next day I had a stroke. And so I went from being someone who thought I was in complete control of my environment, my world, into a world that I had no knowledge of. And I lost complete control, not only physically, but I had no control over what was happening around me. And I found that very, very, very disconcerting. And I think one of the things that we talk about all the time in stroke journey is that no two strokes are the same. Everyone experiences it differently. But there are a couple of things that all stroke persons experience, and that's anxiety and fear and loss of control. And that's exactly what happened to me. And so in hindsight, that was the trigger that made me want to help others sort of smooth out that journey, and so that they're not so afraid or anxious or concerned about what's going to happen, and that they have some sense of control over where they're going and how they're going to experience the journey as they move forward. So that was really the first step in it. And I think too, because I was hospitalized, I was in acute care for 4 weeks, and sorry, acute care for 2 weeks, a rehab in hospital for 2 weeks, and then I was in outpatient rehab for 6 months. It gave me a lot of time to really think about what was happening and to watch others as well. And I had a really strong support system. I had a strong family support system. I was fairly cognizant. I didn't suffer with loss of memory or loss of language. And so I was in a little more control than some of the people I would observe. And I would think, well, if I'm feeling this way and I'm at such a loss, what are they going through? Why can't it be smoother for them? And so that sort of led me towards wanting to do something. I didn't know what it was at the time, but wanting to participate in making it easier for people to navigate this crazy world of post-stroke. life. And so that's where it started. And then when I went to and Maureen, stop me because I'll go on.
No, please
forever.
go on. No, it's wonderful. Please continue.
When I got to the outpatient rehab, because as I said, they were wonderful in the hospital. But again, I was coming to the end of the 2 weeks. I had the 2 weeks in acute care where I lost everything on the right side. So I had to learn to walk again. I had to learn to use my hand, everything. I had to learn to feed myself. But at the end of the 2-week period, I moved into the rehab section of the hospital. And again, clinicians, everyone was wonderful. The process was great, but I knew there was an endpoint coming, and that was going to be short term, that I'd get 2 weeks, I might get 3 weeks, but then I'd be out into the community and having to, I didn't know what. So again, walking it through with a number of the clinicians that were there, they helped me with, well, you could apply to go into the regional rehab center, and these are the things that are available. So we started to talk about them. And I did get it, fortunately, which was the best thing that ever happened, into the regional stroke rehabilitation center. And that's where I met some fantastic clinicians and experts in their fields. And I got involved in what was then, I think, a precursor to all of this, Maureen, the MIST study,
That's right.
my stroke team, which was at the early stages of this. And it really, I didn't realize at the time the difference that it was going to make, because it involved people. I had a speech therapist attached to my team. I had a physiotherapist. I had a occupational therapist. All of them, and they all had a game plan for me, and we worked on it together. And so I found that I experienced a sense of, wow, I have a voice in this, and my voice was being heard. And so again, from that, I decided whatever comes up, I'm going to try and be an advocate for others as they go through it. And that's where it started. Hopefully that answers what you were
That's
asking.
fantastic, David. Can you tell us a little bit about what else you've done with stroke? Because I know you've been involved in other
Well,
initiatives.
again, from that, again, having met the technicians and the clinicians, I was invited to speak at and you'll remember what it was, Maureen. It was a Partners Day where they were looking at encouraging funding for programs, and I was going to speak as someone who had been through the program. And that's where I met Eileen Britt, who was with the Regional Stroke Network, and she invited me to get involved with them, which I leapt at. So I started as a patient partner on the Patient and Family Advisory Council for Hamilton Health Sciences, and we meet and look at advocacy. We look at ways of supporting other persons with stroke as they journey on, and we're looking for plans. And so that's where the stroke journey map, my stroke journey map, being one of the first projects that I was involved with. And that was an incredible learning experience for me, because all around the table, as I said, were patient partners who had experienced stroke, but all in different ways. So for me, aphasia wasn't part of what happened for me, but I learned a great deal about that as we're looking at the map. And as you saw in the snapshot of the map that Kathy showed you, every single thing on that map takes into consideration a person experiencing aphasia, from the simplicity of the language, to the amount of print on the page, to the colors that are used, to what will stimulate or what will confuse the person viewing it. So we got to really learn from one another and share. And again, we'll talk, I guess, in other questions, but it was that sense that everybody around the table, the voice was equally important. I had said to Steph and to Eileen when I came up, I'm not interested in coming and sitting through meetings if I'm there as a token, or if I'm there so that you can say, we've got a patient sitting there. If I don't have something to offer, then I don't want to come. That's not selfish. It's not, I want to feel useful, and I want to feel valued. And I had never for 1 minute have not felt that way in all of the work and all of the activities I've been involved with. I've always felt that that even when we've had to, and I think Kathy alluded to the different languages, because the researchers really have to understand, for me, when they all started talking those initial days, I said, whoa, 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 Steph, I don't know this language.
Mhm.
This is a language that I'm unfamiliar with. The acronyms that you're using, the short forms, the terms that you're using, I appreciate that you all understand that, but I need to understand it if I'm going to add anything to it. And so it was terrific. Then right away, they took us through it. They explained it. They talked about it. And we're always open and willing to take questions and help you prepare for the meeting so that you weren't sitting there as a lump.
Well, that's fantastic, David. I feel so privileged to hear your story. Thank you for sharing that, and also for using your experience, which was very traumatic and challenging for you and your family, to better the lives of people with stroke, and for speaking up about some of these issues. I think that's really admirable, and so thank you for that, and that hopefully provide some context for the remainder of our conversation around your involvement. So maybe we could move to that question then, and just if you could just tell us a little bit about the nature of your involvement in the project. So what exactly were you involved in with respect to the transitional care study?
Well, interestingly enough, and this is where I think the patient input for researchers really showed that it can make a change. When we went in, there was an initial plan that the staff members, the clinicians, the people involved had drafted, and it was there, and it could have gone probably as it was out and been used in the hospitals, but it was brought to the table for us to look at just how it spoke to us, and did it address the concerns that we had. And we talked about this as a journey, and how it's not finite. It doesn't just come to an end. It's what's next, and how many feel lost in that system when they're in either the hospital or in rehab. After it's what's next, they don't see it. So we were looking at it as an overview as to where the person with stroke was going and what options were there. But in a way that would speak to them, that was not just something that only the doctor would understand. It's something they could physically say, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, this is how I'm going to get there.
Right.
And again, when you're dealing with aphasia-friendly material, it had to be very clear and very specific. So we were involved in every step of the way in looking at that. So right from the very beginning, it looked very bright, very colorful. And a couple of people said, I find that really distracting. It's unnerving me. The colors are, and that was something that the researchers hadn't thought about. They just thought, this looks great. It's terrific. And so when that came up, immediately there were changes made to it that made a difference. So that it did make a difference to some, but to the people with aphasia, it made a huge difference, and it made it accessible to them, down to the little cars that you see on the map. They were facing in a different way, and it sounds silly, but that's disconcerting to someone who is slightly confused, or they think it's supposed to go backwards, because you're trying to read into what's happening, rather than being very specific and very clear, and careful about what's being said. And for me, it was even the amount of language. I was thinking, oh, we need to have as much information as possible on there, and found out, no, that's not what a lot of people need. They need it to be clear, concise, and economically used. So I found that as we gathered and we met, there was a really great feeling around the table that you knew, and it's very kind of you to say we all bring expertise. I think we do bring expertise of sort, but there are gifts that the researchers, that the clinicians bring to the table that the patient partner doesn't have.
Yeah.
But there are emotional and psychological things that the partners bring that the researchers aren't aware of. But I always felt around that table that it was equally being shared. I never felt like people were dismissing it or saying, well, you don't understand, this is how it has to be. There was always a sense of, well, tell me why. What's this? And there was a great sense of sharing that made me want to keep going. and I think that made others feel exactly the same way.
Well, that's great, David. It's good to hear that you felt valued, and your contribution, your lived experience certainly enhanced the website, because as researchers, we don't see those little details. We don't see font or size or colors as being as important, but certainly from the perspective of someone who's experienced a stroke, as you mentioned with aphasia, that is really critical. And we know that you were involved in the paper-based version of the map, and that really helped us to accelerate the digitization, because you were familiar with it and could advise us on how to digitize the map in a way that was user-friendly and interactive. But you also helped us with a couple of videos that we'll be sending out shortly to participants. And you also got involved in the steering committee for the study, and you participated in a number of meetings. And most importantly, I think having that connection with the Central South Regional Stroke Network and the background that you bring, not only as a stroke survivor, but also the background you bring in terms of developing the map and working with the network. You had a lot of knowledge around, the community resources that are out there, and where the gaps exist, and how to design the website to address those gaps so that people could better access those resources when they're discharged from hospital and they're feeling lost and abandoned. So Kathy, is there anything you wanted to comment on?
Maybe just the researcher nerd side of me, that where this all started. As I mentioned, I'm a statistician. We don't often tend to work with people. We go off in the corner and do our analysis. So for me, this was really different, working with patient partners, and actually started, just like every academic does, go read the literature, figure out what you're supposed to do, right? And then do those things. And so I read the SCORE framework from CIHR, and I read the PCORI one from the US, and there's an international one, and there was something from the UK, and they all sort of didn't really help me very much. They didn't even agree. So some of those frameworks say involve the patients in everything you do right from the get-go. And we've had studies where that hasn't actually made sense, because some of the elements of the study have been very technical, and I think patients would be frustrated. So David, you were kind of mentioning that where we bring certain things to the table, some of our studies have elements that the patient partners would feel uncomfortable or confused if they actually were involved. This study didn't have that, though, because it was a website for patient partners. So from the get-go, it made sense to involve you right from the very beginning. But as far as how to do it, it was just, I think it was almost organic. I don't know, Maureen, if you would call it that, but it was just, I decided to stop being a researcher for a minute and just have it, let it go, see how it goes. And I think we had such a great team. We worked really, really well together right from there was rapport. And probably that history with NIST helped to already make people more comfortable and yourself more comfortable. But it was really an organic process to some extent, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Maureen, can I just add to that as well?
Absolutely.
Because there's something I hadn't seen more in slides before she put them up today, but your spectrum for public participation.
Yes.
I found that really fascinating, because in my work in theology, we work to inform in order to form, in order to transform.
Okay.
And I thought it applies to exactly what you talked about, that we have to inform if we're going to shape and form, if we hope to see change, if we hope to see a transformation take place. And I really see an overlap in the types of research, and theological research and health research, that we have to inform ourselves in order to form or shape ourselves if we want to affect change. And I just found that really a nice linkage for me.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really, really interesting. So maybe we should be thinking along those lines.
It puts a framework there.
Absolutely.
Because we're informing ourselves, we're shaping ourselves, and then we will make a change.
That's right. Absolutely. So just to follow up on Kathy's point around your involvement. So from your perspective, David, why do you think it's important to involve patients as research partners as in a study like this? I
think exactly because of what Kathy said when she talked about being a research nerd or being a statistician. I mean, we all become in our own way, and not in a negative way. We all can become with blinders. So we get very focused on what we're doing. We get very focused on where we're going. I taught for years, so everything was academic education, and I didn't do this. I didn't open it, right? You're focused on what you're doing and where you're going. And I think with something like this, you can get caught up in the minutia of it all and become so immersed in it that you don't hear the voices of those that are around. And I think that in something like this, where you're talking about people who have experienced it, you have to hear those voices if you're going to be open to seeing what you can do to help them, because you can't simply impose this is what you need, because you don't know what they need. They don't know what they need, and together maybe we can discover what we need, but you can't tell me what will fix me. That they need to be part of that. And I think that
solution.
The voice that the patient partner brings to the table helps ground the work that's being done in the real world, rather than just the ideal world of this is what would happen if everything fell into place. No, here are the roadblocks, some of the things that we're going to stumble up against. These are the things that we as partners have experienced, down to whether it's how to open a fruit container to have your lunch, or how you're going to get down the stairs. All of those things impact the experience for the partner. And I think bringing that voice to the table when you're looking at how to improve experience for those partners, I think that's just critical.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And being part of the solution. And, because we, as you say, we have blinders as researchers. We don't see that perspective necessarily. So that's.
And I don't think that's wrong. It's not negative.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be focused, but it's good to have somebody saying, spread the blinders a little bit. Think about this.
Well, from our perspective, we totally agree. And I think a lot of times we know that older adults who have a stroke and multiple chronic conditions, or just older adults in general, are not often included in research, because it's sometimes challenging to include that group because there might be barriers like transportation or physical limitations. So, or like those practical issues that prevent researchers from really fully engaging that group. So we were really privileged to be able to engage such a diverse group of patient partners, including yourself. And to do that over Zoom, I think have helped to address some of the barriers that we faced as a group in doing that. And I think, we need to keep in mind when we're engaging people like yourself, is that each person brings to the table a unique set of gifts, preferences, and needs. And as researchers, we need to consider that when we're thinking about engaging, so that we can tailor your engagement. So we can say to David, we have a better sense of what your gifts are, what your needs are, and where you'd like to be involved. And if there might be any barriers to your involvement, we can think about those ahead of time and try to address them so that we can maximize your involvement in the research. Kathy?
I don't have a lot to add here. The relevance is what it's all about in my own mind. And as an academic, again, when I go to the literature, it's not that it's bad. It's very high level, it's conceptual. And I think most frustrating for me is it's generalizable. That's the aim of it. And so whether those things are going to work in your context is just, I'm left wondering. I'm wondering, how does it look on the ground? Exactly what are we going to do? And how does that do any of those things work in our context? And that's, to me, where the patient partners come in, is they're giving us that lens. So it isn't that the literature is bad. Like you said, David, it's not bad. It's just we need to open the blinders to help us apply it so that it works.
So just to pick up on your on the next point, David, can you tell us a little bit about what made it easy for you to participate as a patient research partner in this study? What was easy for you? How do we facilitate your involvement?
Well, I think I'm going to speak for all of us. I think it's one of the good things that COVID gave us. The idea of meeting on Zoom a lot of people, there are barriers for traveling, there are barriers for getting to meetings, there are barriers for that were eliminated because of Zoom. We could gather on Zoom, everyone could from the comfort of their home, all the challenges of the other isolation being aside, everybody could feel a part of the activity because it was easy to get on once everybody mastered Zoom. But I think for me, it was that acceptance and that I felt with with whichever project I was working on, whether it was with the parent, patient and family advisor, whether it was one of yours, I felt that I was never an outsider. I always felt that everyone was, and not in a condescending way. I felt that everybody was making the partners feel like partners, that it was important to hear the voice. It wasn't a matter, well, what do you think? And then moving on. There was a value to a respect for what had to be offered. And I think a genuine concern for the people that were involved. We have a couple of partners who have difficulty with reading, so having slides would be difficult. So there was always an opportunity to send them a hard copy, and they could read it ahead of time, so that they weren't struggling or frustrated with seeing things flash by. That was always taken into consideration. Based on the needs of the individual person. It wasn't, well, patient partners need this. No, some patient partners need that. Some patient partners need something else. And I always felt that was taken into consideration, that the needs of what the patient partner needed in order to feel valued and feel useful was taken into account in the activities.
Well, I think you said it all, David. I don't know if I have a lot to add to that. Certainly we tried to, make sure that there was that the role that you played was clear, and that that was negotiable too, right? It was flexible in terms of what role you wanted to play, or roles, and how you wanted to be involved, how you wanted to join. There wasn't a lot of choice with COVID because we did have to do video. But if this wasn't in a COVID environment, it would have been issues around transportation, or do you want to join by phone or by video conference? But that type of thing. I think we tried to offer all of the participants.
I think you did, and I think you did it in a really positive way, even down to, I mean, you were talking about writing the different reports and writing different papers that were out, and it was never, well, which of the researchers would like to be involved in this? It was opened up to the entire table. If you felt that was a gift you had, or you had something to offer, then you were given that opportunity. And I think that goes a long way. To not everybody's going to jump at that, not everybody's going to feel comfortable with that, but there may be someone who has a gift in that area, and you acknowledged it. And I think that's really important, because again, it builds trust in the people that you're working with, and it builds a team.
Right. Fantastic. Kathy, I don't know whether you have a comment or wanted to move on to the next.
I don't have anything else to say there. I'm glad to hear that we did it right.
So am I.
That's good news. Yeah, we had a sort of related question, I guess, is just what do we as researchers need to consider? And maybe you've already said that in a sense, I think you have, but just all the things we need to think about so that we do this right, the participation piece right.
Well, again, I think you have done it right. It's in my humble opinion. But I think it's that sense, well, I alluded to in the last one about teamwork, that sense that as a team, we're going to explore this, making people feel that their time is valuable, and that what they're going to bring has merit. And so that it's done in such a way that people don't feel that they're, I don't know how to say it, they don't feel sidelined, they don't feel left out, they feel valued. I guess I've said that already, but I think that whole sense of encouraging the patient involvement is first giving them opportunities to do things that they are able to do, and making it so that they're not being challenged beyond their capabilities, but that if they wish to stretch, they have that opportunity. That some may simply want to have an opportunity to speak. Others may want to get in and do some research themselves and come back with ideas that they're presenting or readings that they've done. But I think it's that knowing what gifts they bring or getting to know them as individuals helps in the process, so that I think getting to know them as people is just as important, because remember, as researchers, you would know with one another, you work with one another, you would see them on a daily basis, but your patient partners are in a way parachuting in. So it's sort of important to get to know them, to know where their strengths, where their weaknesses are, and what needs to be done to make them feel a part of the team.
Well, it's interesting that you say those things, because I agree with you that those are the things we need to do. And it's not something as a researcher you read about, like it's who you are.
Mhm.
And I mean, you can read that that's important, but to actually do it means you have to be genuine in the process and really accept that as you know, the way you're going to operate and the way you should be operating. So it's a personal thing.
Yeah, I think it's a very different approach to research, because think about research can be very isolating. You can spend hours, days, years doing work yourself, right? But if you're doing research that involves other people, then there has to be that personal connection. It can't simply be books and computers, and that there's feelings involved, there's relationships involved, and building those relationships, I think, are very important for openly honest collaboration. And I think that's the beauty of this kind of research, because it's not just book research, it's not just academic research. You're really researching the human condition and how it unfolds. And to do that, you've got to interact with humans.
Well, and for us as you know, on our end, when we're even thinking about these projects, it's time that we have to recognize it's more time than you would normally spend, because we can get together, we were right next door, we have a quick meeting and we move. Well, that's not the way it's going to look when you're working with patient partners and they're outside the organization. So there's time to all of those things you mentioned, time to build relationships, time to find the right people to be working with, patient partners, all of that stuff. And then the money to actually do it. So, because if you don't have funding for patient engagement, and in time is money, so if you don't have that built into your budget, it's not going to be done, or it won't be done well. So I think that, you know, we as researchers also need to be thinking about that right in the proposal we write for the project, is funding to do this right, and the time it takes to do it right, and financing that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was where you actually started, David. I thought this was interesting, because you said all patients that have had a stroke, the one thing they have in common is the anxiety and fear, but loss of control. Same thing for us in a way. We have that same anxiety in losing control, that we are the experts usually. We say this is the way it is and this is the way it goes, and that's the way research happens, is whatever we say it is and how it should be done. But in this model, it's different. We're facilitators, we're working together, we're co-building, co-designing, co-deciding, all of that stuff. And that's very, that's a loss of control for us that we have to be comfortable with.
See, it's unnerving for everybody. It's unnerving because everybody has to let go of preconceived notions. And I think that's frightening. But look at the positive things that have come out of what we've been doing. And I think it's really incredible, the steps that have been taken and the change that have made since 5 years ago, which was my stroke, when I think that they're in the hospital room, there was just a whiteboard where people would write on, and you didn't know. And the process now is so much more person-centered and so much more involved for both the patient and their caregivers, as it is for the clinicians. It's, as Maureen said, it's not being done to them, but it's being done with them. And I think that in 5 years, that's been a huge step. So where we go in another 5 years is, limitless.
I don't know, Maureen, anything to add to?
No, I don't have nothing to add. I think you've said all of it. All of it. I'm just wondering if we could, do we go on to the next question, Kathy, or should we stop for?
Well, it's actually, we're almost out of time, just like we thought would happen.
That's right.
We would go longer, but yeah, maybe we should open it up for questions that people have that they'd like to ask.
Is someone monitoring the chat?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Any questions for
I have
us
a
or for David?
I have a question.
Sure, Kim.
Hi. Okay. I'm sorry. I missed your presentation. I just remembered. Sorry about that. But I'm going to go
Okay.
back and listen to it. But
Okay.
I've always been concerned about people. I have a disability myself. So people who have strokes, when they go back to their home after rehab, is there a some kind of funding channel that people can access to get some help with renovating their homes? I know that there's a disability incentive if for a one-time renovation through the federal government, I think, and you're allowed a one-time money. But I don't know if there's any other organizations that have funding available for stroke victims to help them with their homes.
That's not my area of expertise.
Mine either. I don't
No,
understand.
or mine.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But
Okay.
I do think that's worth following up with
Yeah.
you with the stroke network, contacting them to find out what's available. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Okay.
But I'll certainly take it back to the advisory committee and see if there's anything.
Okay. Thank you.
There is something in the chat here that Ontario March of Dimes has a home and modification program.
That's
Thanks, Winnie.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing
you.
that.
I've just got a quick comment and a short question. David, you outlined exactly where I came from and what I went through with my stroke. It was in a different order, and while I typed it in my chat, I'll ask it here. Has success or lack of success with early comorbidities, does that impact on the success or lack of success for the patient having a new one? By example, my first comorbidity is HIV, which I've had since '94, and went through all of the issues of fear, anger, and so on, dealt with them there. When I got to the stroke, I didn't have to deal with those. They were sort of built into how I moved on with things.
Mm.
But is that the case, or is there any literature to show whether that's a benefit or a negative as how well or poorly a first condition is dealt with?
I
David?
think so, Maureen.
I think so. I think what you're suggesting, Mike, I think what you're saying is you developed that you had a lot of strengths when you were facing your stroke because you had worked through another illness and had developed some coping strategies.
Yeah, I had 20
dealing with
plus
that.
years of failures with HIV medications that brought me to the stroke to say, okay, this is just one more bit of baggage to carry. So I'll work with that. I'm wondering if my positive success with the HIV helped later, and what would have happened if I dealt with that badly? Would that have impacted later on and me not deal with subsequent conditions?
I would think for me, and again, this is a non-academic answer to it.
Mhm.
I would think that it did help you. It did help you to build up a reserve for dealing with the stroke as well, because I know that for me, it went the other way, that after the stroke and that loss of control, I was more anxious about what could happen down the road when I didn't have that control. And it's one of the reasons that was an impetus for me to get involved, because I didn't want people to be struggling with what I was thinking about. So I think you did have a reserve that led you to a bit more strength as you went.
And that's sort of the same path I took, albeit a little earlier in with the HIV rather than the stroke was. Sure. I wanted to dig in as much as I could to learn as much as I could, just for that when something else happens situation.
Right. And we recognize that people have strength. Everyone has strengths, and we try to identify what those are and really help people to use those strengths. to support them in their recovery. To really, because everyone has faced different issues in the past and have different strengths and areas where they need to move. And certainly we try to work with patients to look at those strengths rather than always looking at kind of their problems or their deficits or their needs, but rather taking more of a strengths-based approach.
Well, and I even wonder, as I was listening to David talk about his involvement in all of this research, and whether even that involvement in the positive aspects of it were helpful in recovering from the stroke and maintaining health. That activity, that engagement.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
In my own
very
case, it
much so.
certainly was. I had to find something to do, so I used whatever tools I had at hand to recover.
Yeah, that's
I took a college
exactly.
course.
I agree, Mike, because it was, for me, it was, I can't just sit here. I mean, from day 2 in the hospital, it was, I've got to get back. I'm not done yet. I've got more to do. I've got more I want to do. So what do I need to do to get myself back, and how do I keep going? Yeah.
Okay. Sue?
Yes, I realize it's 1:01. So thank you so much to David and Kathy and Maureen. I think there were some real gems in there, you know, from the expression of opening the blinders and a tailored approach and the real personal relationship. So thank you for that. For anyone who's interested in staying on to continue this conversation and our reflecting together time, please stay on. But otherwise, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great to see you.
Thanks, everyone.